Come, let us learn a Maamar together. Ois Yud Zayin of the Maamar Heichaltzu. The Maamar Heichaltzu, we've been talking about how ego ruins us. It causes us to separate. And we're talking about very much an avodah in our life. And chapter 17 is the one that wraps up this section of the Maamar. And Mir Hashem, from next place, it's a different direction the Maamar goes. It's much more haskala, intellectual, esoteric concept that obviously have a practical application, but from a much higher level. V'zeu in Klipas Midyan, and this is basis on everything that we said, ego, etc. We're going to now answer the questions that we started off the Maamar in Ois Aleph and Beis. This is what Klipas Midyan is all about. Lashon Medayin U'Riva. It's an expression of Madayin, which means strife and quarreling. Shu Inyan HaPedot Heichaltzu, which practically means Midyan is divisiveness. And when we break apart, when we fragment, similar to what we spoke about when a person has baseless hatred, it causes separation and disunity and fragmentation in communities and in friendships. And this is the absolute opposite, and not only the opposite, the opposer, the klal Shem Havaya, to the general concept of Shem Havaya. Because Shem Havaya is unity and synthesis, integration. Klipas Midyan, and Klipas Midyan is what totally negates that. It's worse than the Klipas of the 7 nations in Eretz Canaan, that when the Jewish people came to Eretz Yisrael to conquer, that we spoke about earlier in the Maamar, that the 7 nations refer to the 7 bad midos. What kind of midos are we talking about? We're talking about desire, lust, anger, perpetuation for violence, haughtiness, ego, etc. Each one of them causes a blemish. Just in one specific letter of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Just like a blemish makes the appearance of something look a little not perfect and it affects its function, so too, when a person has a blemish, it literally affects the manner in which the Havshachas come down from Shem Havaya. The world gets sustained from Shem Havaya. And yes, Shem Havaya is oneness, and we'll discuss this in tremendous depth in the later chapters. But nevertheless, there is 4 different letters within, and each one focuses on the specific energy within this world. So the 7 nations are the 7 character traits that you make a whole in Shem Havaya. So too, when someone transgresses something of the 365 prohibitions, also over there, they affect one specific section in the letter of Shem Hashem. So in other words, bad character traits affect Shem Hashem, and one of those 365 loisa says. But nevertheless, he says, nevertheless, before I go on and start telling you, contrasting the fact that these go on a specific letter, and Yeshus goes on the whole thing, Midyan is the whole Shem Havaya. But I want to tell you, don't take it too easy, the fact that a person makes effect just in one letter. There's a pasuk that refers to somebody who curses Shem Hashem, the one who blasphemes his name, but the word they use is noikev, and noikev is l'shoin nekev, an expression of literally piercing a hole. When one causes a particular blemish by transgressing one of the 365 averes, he's making a hole in the whole essence of Shem Havaya, which is unity. And he gives an example of the body. For example, if someone damages one of the 365 gidden, which blood vessels, nerves, sinews, veins, etc., and you draw blood, this affects the whole body. And, in Gemara, it talks a lot about bloodletting. And when a person did bloodletting from one vein, the whole day was different. There was lots of different things they had to do to make sure that they don't get sick from that one thing they did. They took out blood. So this is all when you do any avera or when you do a specific bad midah. However, Midyan, which is total division and separation, that affects the general concept, the general entity of Shem Havaya. Therefore, it's very hard to fix Klipas Midyan. Yosem HaKlippus Zayin Midas Rois. It's harder than the other 7 midos. Gambi Suri Torah, even those that involve actual transgressions of biblical midoraisa. And proof of this, and this is a proof that the Alter Rebbe brings in his Maamar, the Mittel Rebbe brings in his Maamar. It's a very much a foundational concept of the Heichaltzu Maamar. That the first galus, the galus Babel, was on the worst sins. It was on literally the tzicha, niyuf, etc., the cardinal sins. Avodah zarah, gilui arayis, shvichas dam, idolatry, adultery, and murder. But nevertheless, it was only 70 years. The bisman ein shana, within 70 years, the Jewish people were able to correct the blemishes caused by the sins. So even though these are massive sins, cardinal sins, they're specific. Galus Achar Nazir, but our Galus that we've been in for 1950 years, Galus Achar Nazir, Shu al Sinas Chinam, baseless hatred, Kedubav and Sinas Chinam Nefet Beis Hasheni, as it's known that Sinas Chinam was destroyed from, Sinas Chinam destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. And at the time of the writing, already 1800 years later, the Galus is still Therefore, because the pgam, the whole, the effect is in the general concept of Shem Hashem. He says over here in the footnotes, where the Rebbe in his Maamar Heichaltzu adds further explanation to the reason the present exile has been prolonged due to the sin of baseless hatred. Baseless hatred is very hard to detect. A person may never realize that he possesses this fault, and consequently, it's very difficult to correct. And therefore, therefore Hashem said, you have to Moshe Rabbeinu has to take the revenge of Midyan on behalf of Shem Havaya, because Midyan opposes Shem Havaya. Therefore, the Muhammad against Midyan is literally the retribution of Havaya. And therefore, the Muhammad had to be through Moshe before he passed away. Because Moshe is the ultimate humility. And as we spoke throughout the Maamar, humility leads to oneness. Essential bittul, as we'll explain. Therefore, he was the one that gave the strength to the neshamas of Yidden to fight against Midyan, obliterate them. And therefore, he had to appoint soldiers to wage war. And this is also the reason why they use the term Heichaltzu me'itchem, from amongst you. That means only a few Jews would fight, but nevertheless, me'itchem Heichaltzu mashbekuchem. The word Heichaltzu is used because it implies the involvement of everybody. So in other words, yes, there was a few me'itchem, but Heichaltzu, the whole nation has to get ready and prepare. So that there should be the unity and integration of everybody. That's the opposite of separation and division. And through that, they'll wage the war on Midyan and give the revenge against Midyan. Kitzer, short, Midyan is the worst of the 7 nations. And it opposes the general thing of Shem Havaya. Just like we see that our last galus, the one we're in, has been going so long, and we answer the questions that we started off with. And Yiratzin, as we finish this part of the Maamar and move on to the next Maamar, part of the Maamar, Yiratzin Shetish V'Shchina B'Maisi Adenu, and we should have incredible